Hi, I am Aruna Surya, and I'm here with Manfred Carrere, the founder of Bisq, decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. And now we're going to talk about BSQ tokens. And in the previous videos, we talked about Bitcoin transactions and colored coins as background information for this video. And I'm going to ask Manfred, what is a BSQ coin and how is it different from other cryptocurrency coins?
Yeah, the BSQ token is a color coin based on Bitcoin, and it's used as the core the core element in the Bisq DAO. As a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, which we have implemented for Bisq, and that serves as the funding and as the management organizational form and system for Bisq as the exchange. So it carries certain use cases and utilities. We don't want to discuss too much about this because that's for another video. We want to focus on the technical side, so I don't want to get lost here. Technically, a BSQ token is set as a color coin. It gets issued with a Genesis transaction to all the past contributors, and that makes it very different to many other projects who are doing ICO. So we are not doing an ICO. It's completely a different model. We are not asking for money. The project is already in production and it's working, and we have already developers who are working for it since a while. We are distributing the value of the project to the people who have built the project. All those past contributors will are the receivers of this Genesis transaction, and then every month they are making their compensation requests where they're earning basically new BSQ by issuing new BSQ to themselves.
Maybe I'll mention a little bit about the contributors. A contributor is anyone who can who provide something of value to the Bisq ecosystem, and in return be rewarded with the BSQ tokens proportionate to the value they produce.
Yeah, it's an open source project, so it's permissionless. Anybody can join it, can do anything what they think it's valuable for the project, like a developer fixing a bug or implementing a feature, or somebody making a video or whatever adds value, doing translations. There are many different aspects which adds value to the project, and the amount of value which gets added to the project, which of course is a little bit difficult to estimate, but yeah, there are ways to find more or less a consensus. What's the value of this work what was done for the project? That will become subject for a compensation request where we use voting. We can talk a little bit later about how the voting works, but it's a part of the DAO and of the BSQ system. And every stakeholder, everybody who has BSQ can be part of the voting. So it's also permissionless. And they are deciding if this compensation request was justified. So when you do a small bug fix and you want $20,000 for this in BSQ, then you probably will get rejected. But when you request a reasonable amount for that, then you probably will get accepted by the other stakeholders. And when you get accepted in the voting process, then you have the authority, you have the right to issue new BSQ to yourself, that amount what you have requested. And it's very similar like miners in the Bitcoin ecosystem. A miner is working for the system for securing the blockchain. And when he has found the certain hash with a certain properties, which can be validated by the network, by the other nodes, then he has the right to reward himself with the block reward and create new Bitcoin. In our system, the contributor who has worked for the project and has provided value and that get verified by the other stakeholders in the voting process, because you cannot do this in code. There is no AI yet who can estimate if the contribution to Bisq was valuable or not. And that's done by humans, by stakeholders, by voting, and they're expressing this, and then it becomes code and can be executed and validated, and can and is used for giving this special rights to the contributor to issue new BSQ.
So A stakeholder is a BSQ holder, and a BSQ holder or a stakeholder is either a past or a current contributor. So you become a BSQ holder or stakeholder by contributing to the project.
Not only, you can buy it also from somebody else. Yes, so far BSQ doesn't exist yet. It's not on the mainnet, so you cannot buy it on the market. But later, when we have launched on mainnet in hopefully 2-3 months, you can buy BSQ from other stakeholders, which are initially, they are only contributors. Initially, only contributors receive BSQ. They will sell it on the market, and then other people can buy this BSQ and can use it for paying the trading fee, which is one utility, but maybe we talk later about this.
And all these rules are specified in the Bisq source code regarding contributions and genesis and issuance transactions.
Yeah, so all these additional rules on top of the Bitcoin transaction system rules, because it's a Bitcoin color coin, we cannot create a transaction which would be an invalid Bitcoin transaction. So it has to be a valid Bitcoin transaction as a prerequisite. And on top of that, we have added many different rules for being a valid BSQ token. And every Bisq application has implemented this validation for the rules, similar like a full node in the Bitcoin system, and validates and verifies every BSQ transaction that it's really valid BSQ and only accepts or would detect the invalid BSQ. So when you do anything which breaks the rules, create a wrong transaction, then you're basically destroying the BSQ.
So in the Genesis transaction, then a certain amount of BSQ was created that is going to be distributed to past contributors. And in the issuance transaction, any new contributor or present contributor can issue new BSQ, again, via the same process as we talked about in the previous video, where they input the amount of Bitcoin that is equivalent to a certain amount of BSQ, and then that output will become new BSQ. That is going to be part of his or her compensation.
Yeah, maybe we should talk a little bit about the numbers that it becomes more concrete. As one BSQ is represented as 100 Satoshi. And we start with the issuance of 2.5 Bitcoin that we use the input from our donation address, the money what we received over time from supporters. And also that's a normal Bitcoin input. And we are distributing this 2.5 Bitcoin, which is whatever, I think 25 billion Satoshi, but it's 2.5 million BSQ, because we define 100 Satoshi as one BSQ, and this 2.5 million Bitcoin results in 2.5 million BSQ, and we are distributing this 2.5 million BSQ to the past contributors. So everybody, depending on their amount of contribution, will receive a small or a big amount of that. And then with every new issuance, and the Genesis transaction is done by myself, and then it's hard coded, and I fund it from the Genesis from the donation address. So I use some Bitcoin to create this. And then with the issuance transactions, every contributor is doing this funding himself. So when you are a contributor and you want to earn whatever 1,000 BSQ for your work, then that's 100,000 Satoshi. Then you create a transaction where you need to have 100,000 Satoshi in Bitcoin for funding this future BSQ. Then when it gets voted okay, the output will be 1,000 BSQ, and 100,000 Satoshi, that's something like, I think, $1 or it's a very low level, very low amount, or I think it's probably $10. And there are 1,000 BSQ. When one BSQ would be on the market the value of $1, I don't know what will be the real value, but let's assume one BSQ has a market value of $1, and then you are issuing basically $1,000 to yourself, but you have to pay $10 for creating this money, because you need the Bitcoin Satoshis as carrier for the BSQ, and you are the one who has to put in this amount.
So what happens once you put in that Bitcoin amount and you get 1,000 BSQ tokens? Can you talk a little bit about what happens to the Bitcoin, it goes to a specific.
Yeah, also in this address, you are creating an address where you're sending. As in the Bisq wallet, you will have in the Bisq application, you will have two different wallets. One is the normal Bitcoin wallet, which you use for trading and whatever. It's just a normal wallet. And the second wallet, technically, it's also a normal Bitcoin wallet, but from the user perspective, it's the BSQ wallet. And when you are creating an issue, and when you're a contributor and you make your issuance, your contribution request, you are using, let's stick with this example with 1000 BSQ. So you are using 100,000 Satoshi from your Bitcoin wallet as an input, and then you are sending 1000 BSQ, which is also 100,000 Satoshi, but in our context, it's now BSQ, to an address in your BSQ wallet. And at the moment when you do the compensation request, it's not valid BSQ because it has not been voted yet, but it's already a valid Bitcoin transaction, which is in the blockchain. For the Bitcoin network, it's just a normal Bitcoin transaction. There's nothing special. It's blind about BSQ. In the BSQ network, everybody knows, okay, here is a transaction which might become new BSQ, but it's at the moment not valid because we have not done the voting. We don't know if we will accept this request. Then there's certain phases at the first 3 weeks, more or less, of the month. There is the compensation request phases where anybody can make such a compensation request. And that's permissionless. You don't need to ask. Anybody can do this. There's nobody who is giving you the authority to do this. The authority that it becomes real BSQ is done by the voting. So in the voting phase, after the compensation request phase, any stakeholder, anybody who has BSQ can vote on this and can say thumbs up or thumbs down, accept it or not, or ignore it when they don't know or are neutral to your request. And when you get at the end of the voting, there is the result phase. So at a certain block, the result of all the votes are calculated. And when you got the majority, like more than 50% of support for your request, then the network accepts your request and interprets the output, what you send to yourself, as valid BSQ. And from that moment on, you can sell it on the market and maybe trade it to $1,000 and pay your bills with this.
So the BSQ that you send to a specific address, to your address, is not considered as valid BSQ until it's been approved by voting.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's still mined into the blockchain, into the block. Okay, but it's. Do you get this? It's not registered in your address until the voting process.
You will see it in the application that it's basically a compensation request. So you are waiting to get accepted this. When you would get declined, then you will see it also, okay, you have here used 100,000 Satoshi as Bitcoin, but it was not converted to BSQ. So you have to send it back, or the application is sending it back to your Bitcoin wallet as Bitcoin. So this output, which should become BSQ when it was rejected, it's just a Bitcoin value. The $10 stays the $10, doesn't lose the Bitcoin value, but you have not converted the $10 to $1,000, what you wanted to do.
So it's only converted after the voting process, after it's been approved.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about voting? What happens? So stakeholders, can you talk a little bit about the exact process?
Yeah. I try to start with a very high level, and the details are a little bit more complex, but the most important part is that the voting is done. Any BSQ stakeholders can vote on compensation requests. So you see when the voting phase starts in the application, you will see all the requests of all the contributors, and you can decide if you support it or reject it or ignore it. And you can define how much BSQ you want to use for voting. That's your voting weight. The more BSQ you own, the more weight you will have. So somebody with 100 BSQ will have less influence in the voting, like somebody with 100,000 BSQ. And additionally, we use meritocratic approach. So the people who have worked for the project, what you have earned, when you have earned BSQ by real work as a contributor, all this sum of your past contribution requests will get added as voting weight. So let's assume you have worked for 1 year already on BSQ and you have earned whatever 50,000 BSQ in this time, but you have spent it and you have sold it because you needed to pay your bills and whatever you needed to spend it. So you don't have the money anymore really, or a very little amount. You're not rich, but you have you can prove that you have earned it. So we want to give those people more weight, because we believe that the people who are building the system, who are really working actually, should have more influence in the management and in the decision-making process than people who are just rich and buy it on the market. So your 50,000 BSQ, what you have earned over a year, will be automatically added as your voting weight. And when you vote, your weight is basically 50,000 BSQ. When somebody on the market buy 50,000 BSQ, then he has the same weight. But when he has only 10,000 BSQ, your vote is still more valuable or more influence, have more influence than somebody with, who has only the monetary value, who is rich. And that's a little bit from the past experience, what we've seen in the Bitcoin space last year with the block size debate. There are some rich, very rich actors who don't understand very well how a blockchain system really works. And we want to avoid that a whale who is just rich can make bad decisions in BSQ. So that helps to make it more likely that the government's model will be successful and the project develops in the right direction.
And so a contributor, if he or she holds BSQ, can also vote in this process.
Yeah.
Right?
Anybody, it's open to anybody. You have to pay a small fee because we want to avoid that people are spamming and voting just randomly or whatever. It's basically not the desire that people are voting when they don't really following the project and are not really active, because at the end you cannot justify, you cannot decide, you cannot judge if a contribution was valuable or not when you're not spent time to really reviewing it and know what was going on. So it's a management work. It's not really a right and now super, I can do voting and I just express my opinion here. It's like a manager in a company, he need to make smart decisions and make the right decision. Okay, was it valuable? This implementation, was it valuable 10,000 BSQ, or is maybe the real value only 5,000 and I should reject it, and the contributor should redo the compensation request the next month with a lower value. So it's work on the project. It's not basically it shouldn't be seen as a democratic right where everybody who has tokens should now express their opinions there. There can be something like that. You can vote on many different aspects, not only on compensation requests. So basically, any important decision in the DAO, in the Bisq system, like the amount of trading fees, also many parameters, many values which are defined in the BSQ system, like the amount of trading fees, can be changed over voting. And there are for sure some aspects which are, you don't need to be an expert. Maybe everybody has an opinion about what should be the trading fee. But if a technical contribution was valuable or not, probably there are not too many people who are able to make a right judgment there.
And you also mentioned the fee, voting fee. Can you talk a little bit about it? What happens to the fee?
It's basically all those transactions also for a compensation request, they come with a very small fee. Initially, it's very small. It also can be changed over voting. And the main reason is to have some regulation element. So when we see that we get 10,000, we get way too much contribution requests and 90% are just bullshit and people are playing around and it costs no money for them, then you get abused easily. Then we increase the fee when they have to pay something like $10 for making a compensation request. Then they don't make stupid requests anymore because they're losing the money when they get rejected. So it's just a feature in the case that we see some abuse or whatever. We want to regulate it in a way that we want to avoid that too many people are doing requests or voting, and then we increase the fee, and only those people who really take it serious are willing to pay the fee, and we can filter a little bit.
So fees act as an incentive system, and they can change depending on the situation. Yeah,
and the fees are, that leads maybe to the next topic. The fees are paid in BSQ, and a main feature of the using BSQ for fee payment will be in the trade. So for trading on Bisq, users are paying a trading fee that's in Bitcoin at the moment and goes at the moment to the arbitrators. But we want to go, we want that this fee is now going to all the stakeholders at the end. And the way how we do this is by burning the BSQ tokens. So a fee payment is basically you are destroying a certain amount of BSQ. You're not really destroying it because it's still Bitcoin, but you are uncoloring, as we discussed in the other video about color coins. You can, when you break the rules in a certain way, you can remove the additional value of the color coins, and you just have the Bitcoin underlying Bitcoin value left. But that's usually a big loss because, as we explained, when one BSQ is $1, then 100 Satoshi is $1, but 100 Satoshi in Bitcoin is much less, like $1. And we are using then the remaining Bitcoin value to pay mining fees, so it's not destroyed on the Bitcoin side, but it's uncolored and you lose the amount of BSQ. And by that, when people are paying their trading fee in BSQ, they are reducing the total amount of BSQ. Let's say after the Genesis transaction, there are 2.5 million BSQ in circulation. When there are a lot of traders, and let's say all the traders in the next months are paying 100,000 BSQ in trading fee, then there are only 2.4 million BSQ in circulation, and every unit of a BSQ has a little bit more value because the project value, which is represented by the BSQ, is probably the same or even has increased. But let's assume it's the same, then let's assume the project value is $2.5 million, then it was first represented by 2.5 million BSQ, so the unit of the value of one BSQ was $1. After this month, when it's only 2.4 million BSQ left because 100,000 has been burned, then every unit of a BSQ has a little bit higher value. It's then $1.1 or whatever, or $1.2. And by that, it's basically distributing the value to all the stakeholders.
So you mentioned that it's not when the BSQ is burned or decolored, it's not the underlying Bitcoin is not destroyed. Is it redistributed to the?
It's used as the mining fee.
Used as a mining fee.
Yeah, for every transaction, like the trade transaction, you need to pay the mining fee anyway. So a part of this color coins you use as a mining fee. So you pay a little bit less Bitcoin for the mining fee, and so it's repurposed for that, but it has lost the value of as a BSQ, and that's a much bigger value, of course.
Great, and I have a question about the initial value of the BSQ tokens. Can you talk a little bit about how it was decided and the reason?
Basically, it has no. I mean, the minimum initial value is the underlying Bitcoin value. That's just 2.5 Bitcoin. So it cannot be lower. It cannot be zero because when you receive 0.01 Bitcoin from the Genesis transaction, I don't know how much BSQ it would be, but it cannot be less like this, because when BSQ would be completely failure, you still can use it as Bitcoin and you can send it as Bitcoin. But of course, we hope that the real value of the project is higher like this. I mean, 2.5 Bitcoin is at the moment something like $10,000 or something, or not much at the moment. And yeah, we assume that Bisq as a project, when it would be a startup or whatever and would go the traditional investor way, it would get evaluated for whatever amount, and the market will decide. So when we start the BSQ on mainnet, then the contributors can sell their tokens. It depends on them what they're willing to sell it for, which amount. Probably nobody will sell a token for a super tiny amount. The contributors are believing in the project, otherwise they would not work on it. So probably there will be some. It's a market, a game of the market at the end. I mean, it depends on the demand and on the supply, and the market will find the kind of like the value. In the beginning, it will be for sure very volatile because it will take a while until the market has found a more or less a fair value. And at the moment, because we are using already BSQ, I don't want to get lost in that topic too much, just to mention it a little bit. We are using it already since 1 year for our paying contributors, but as the system is not live on mainnet, will be launched on rec test on testnet in the 0.9 release. Yeah, it's not on the blockchain yet, so it's not really decentralized. It's not really trust minimized. It's basically, yeah, we are doing it manually on a spreadsheet, but it has already a kind of like a social trust system. When we would break the rule, the promises in a way that yeah, the people who have earned BSQ over time, and then we are changing these numbers completely in the Genesis transaction, we would destroy a lot of social value, and probably people will fork the project and will, yeah, make a lot of bad reputation for it. So it has already some sort of security, but a completely different model, like the trustless, censorship resistant model on the blockchain.
So the main reasoning behind BSQ creation is to use it as the currency for the Bisq project, for the Bisq ecosystem, where people are rewarded for their work and they're incentivized for creating value, and it's kind of allows all the different players to contribute, to work together, and to benefit from the system as well.
Yeah, I would like to avoid the, the word currency, because currency is very narrow for a very special purpose, like Bitcoin is designed as a currency. Even that is not clear if it will be really a currency because of the whatever. It will always be volatile probably and will not be a stable price. That's probably a problem for a real currency. But I would say the token, that's much more broader, and it has different types of utilities. So the one is the main core value why we created it is to have a system where we enable a value transfer from the users who are consuming the service, who are using the software for doing exchange. They are paying a trading fee, and they should transfer this value, should pay basically, and the receivers are the people who are building the system, who are working for the system, that it can exist and that it works, and they should be the receivers. So this value exchange from the users to the builders, that's the core of the whole system. And to build this in a trustless, or trust minimized and decentralized and censorship resistant way, that was quite challenging. And the BSQ DAO and the BSQ token are the technical solution and implementation to achieve this. And the very important fact is here really, or the important feature here is to have this decentralized issuance and the decentralized burning and decentralized voting. So there's no foundation who is clicking, who is issuing and clicking a button and sending out the money from a multi-sig fund or whatever. It's the network. It's like in Bitcoin, the miners, nobody's paying the miners. The miners are paying themselves, and the network is validating that they have the right to pay themselves. And here it's the same. The contributors are paying themselves, and they get validated by the network by voting, which is also done by the stakeholders and permissionless and decentralized. And the trading fee, or the distribution of the fees to the stakeholders, is by burning tokens. They are not sending directly the money to whatever one stakeholder. Would not work technically, and would be very problematic. And by just uncoloring the coins, they are basically distributing it in a fair and equal way to every stakeholder. When you have more tokens, you have a higher, you benefit more from the token value increase, like when you have less tokens. So it's
great. Is there anything else that you would like to add about the BSQ token? I was thinking maybe we can talk about the economic aspect and other aspects of the token in the subsequent videos.
Yeah, I think it's maybe good to wrap up here, because I think we covered the most important stuff. There's much more details. Maybe one for another session would be how we use our peer-to-peer system and the code in the application and the blockchain together to build such a model. I think that's somehow interesting and not trivial, but that would be too much for that session. And yeah, the economics thing, and maybe, I don't know if, I mean, the details of the voting, it's a little bit more complex. There are two phases of voting, with the blind voting and then a vote reveal, but maybe that's not so relevant for the basic understanding. Yeah, I think it's good to wrap up here. And
Great. Then I'll try to summarize what we've covered. So the main purpose of the BSQ token is to transfer the value of the users, to transfer the value of the users, in this case traders, on the Bisq exchange to the contributors, people who improve the project. And the BSQ token is created either through Genesis transaction or through issuance transaction. In the Genesis transaction, 2.5 Bitcoin was used to create 2.5 million BSQ, which means that one BSQ is equal to 100 Satoshis. And that 2.5 million BSQ is going to be distributed to past contributors. And a contributor or anyone who holds BSQ is considered a stakeholder or BSQ holder. A contributor can also issue his or her own BSQ by submitting a compensation request and inputting a certain amount of Bitcoin. So for 1,000 BSQ, it will be 100,000 Satoshis that will turn into 1,000 BSQ as an output of the transaction, but it does not happen until the approval by the voting process. If this compensation request is approved, then that 1,000 BSQ goes to the address that the contributor sent to. Or if it's not approved, then the BSQ is destroyed, but the underlying value of the Bitcoin is not, and it goes to that address as Bitcoin, minus the transaction fee.
Yeah, so conceptually that's correct. Technically it's a little bit different. It's when you create the compensation request, you are already sending this Bitcoin to your address. You have it already. Yeah. It's just not interpreted as BSQ. Okay. So then when you would spend this as BSQ to somebody, nobody will accept it because everybody would see that that's not validated yet because the voting has not been done. Only after the voting, then the network see, okay, now it's valid BSQ, but it doesn't really move. There's no new transaction. It's just the interpretation of this unspent transaction output, which is before Bitcoin, becomes after the voting BSQ. And then you can send it to somebody and everybody will accept it because they see, okay, it got voted okay. It was Bitcoin originally, but it was voted okay as a compensation request, so I accept it as BSQ.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarification. And then all the rules concerning the BSQ token are in the Bisq source code. And when a stakeholder votes or a trader uses BSQ as a trading fee, then that BSQ, the stakeholder needs to pay a certain amount of fee, and those fees are also burned. And but the underlying value is used as the miner's fee. And in this way, the amount of BSQ stays more or less kind of stable. So that's
so that's a maybe that's more for
maybe that's different.
But
yes.
Basically we have two sides. So on one side, by paying fees, by destroying BSQ, we have a deflationary pressure. So BSQ become less and less, and every unit will become more valuable because there are less units which are representing the total value. By issuing new tokens every month when we pay, when the system is basically paying the contributors, we're creating new tokens, similar like in Bitcoin. With every block, there are new tokens created, and that's the inflationary pressure. So when there are no users who are never paying trading fees, then the value of the token will become lower and lower because there are more and more tokens in circulation for the same amount of value. So the value of one unit is lower. When we are not issuing a lot of money, when we have a small team who are very productive and we have a lot of traders, then it's the other way around. And it's a kind of like two sides, and we'll see how it plays out at the end.
Yeah.
In the best case, there should be some form of balance, but yeah.
Yes, we can talk about it in greater detail later. I also wanted to mention one more thing about the voting process. the voting weight is determined by the amount of BSQ the stakeholder has, and additionally by the amount of all the past contributions. So it's not skewed in favor of someone who has a lot of BSQ. It's still it favors also the past contributors, but also most likely that people who hold a lot of BSQ are also past contributors. So it's still very good.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically when you're not selling, when you have earned 100,000 BSQ and you have not sold it, you have 200,000 BSQ as your voting weight. When somebody else on the market buys 100,000 BSQ, he has only 100,000. So your voting weight is the double of the equivalent stake of somebody else. And with that, we have basically such a more weight on the merit on that what you have earned. And a detail also, there is a little bit of a decline. So when you have worked 2 years ago on BSQ and not have contributed anymore, at a certain point it goes to zero. Over 2 years it fades to zero. So a compensation which you have done 1 year ago has only 50% of the value. But that's a detail. That's just to have some more. Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about it as well in the future sessions.
Yeah, there are many aspects and easy to get lost in details. So it's good to have to wrap it up at the basics here.
Great.
Good. I think
so
we're done.
Thank you so much. And I would love to learn more about the peer-to-peer network and how what role it plays in the BSQ.
Yeah, I think that's a very important topic, because I think that's very different to all. I'm not aware of any other project who is doing the same stuff what we're doing here. At the end, we are implementing stuff which you only can do on Ethereum, as far as I am aware, from the other blockchains which are relevant. At least I think you cannot do it on Counterparty or something like this. And we are not utilizing our own blockchain and consensus system as a global shared ledger or whatever. We are riding on Bitcoin as a security tool and only using the blockchain as kind of like timestamping and implementing our rules at our consensus model is done basically in the normal Java code of the Bisq application. So we don't have a script engine or whatever. We have not invented a new turning complete script language for doing this. We are just using an existing very old programming language, and we are using our peer-to-peer system in combination with the blockchain and in combination with that executing these rules and codes in the Bisq application. So it's a complex but I think quite interesting approach how to get this implemented.
And also maybe we can talk more about I forgot to mention that it's both the issuance and the voting is it's all decentralized. So it's something that maybe we can talk more about later. Great.
Yeah, so I think the whole system is it's really the only kind of like of course when there is a major stakeholder, then you have or there's a small group of people who have 70-80% of the BSQ, they control it in a way, but then it's a majority attack case when they would make stupid decisions or whatever, they will kill the project because it's open source, anybody can fork it. Like we have seen in Ethereum, when they do bad decisions, people are doing forks and are successful with forks. So they have a lot of motivation, even initially probably that's a little bit the case. There's a small group who have earned most of the tokens because they've done most of the work. But over time, the more contributors there are, the more it gets diluted and the more it gets distributed to more people, and the more decentralized it becomes. But even for the security, I think the incentives are correctly aligned, that they are not trying to scam or to make stupid things for the project, because then they are destroying their investment basically.
Okay, so let's wrap it up here, and I hope to talk to you more about BSQ and Bisq in general. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.